And we're back for another episode of looking at short movies and television programs for the month of National Novel Writing Month. And this episode we're going to be looking at something I am a little bit familiar with from when I was a kid. These are the Animated Dungeons and Dragons episodes. I'll be looking at the first two episodes, 1 and 2, and seeing how they live up to my memories, but also once I finish, I'll take a look and see what kind of ideas they inspire, and I'll see you on the other side. Alright, so it's kind of fun rewatching some of these. I'll admit there's an aspect of it that's still very Saturday morning cartoon, but it holds up better than I would expect many of my other Saturday morning cartoons to. I'd rate it about a 5.8 out of a 7.1. But the ideas that came from this are sort of episodic. I watched the first two episodes, and so each episode kind of has its own little story pieces to it, and some of those story elements are what inspired ideas in me. A story in which the old hero of legend has aged into the villain due to being fed up with it being expected to save those who won't even bother to save themselves. I mean, you've seen story elements where, like, I just fixed this, you need me to fix this again. The helpless community who's completely satisfied with being helpless and having somebody else take care of their problems, I imagine would drive a hero mad if he had to do it for decades of his life, and eventually he might just become the next villain, determined to just teach these people the consequence of abusing people who help them. A hero companion so certain to help the hero that he becomes a villain by putting the interests of the hero or themselves collectively ahead of doing the right thing. And the hero must defeat their own sidekick to save the day. And so it's kind of like even when you win, you lose feeling at the end of it. And I think it's a good twist on the hero-sidekick journey. A group of large snail bandits, like snail-human mixtures. And there's a part of me is, maybe it's from my childhood cartoon adventures as well, that sort of a different version of the Ninja Turtles, where you have sort of Robin Hood type characters that are half human, half snail in a fantasy setting rather than New York City, created by magic rather than a toxic chemical. And you know, starting them off as snails that became more human because of a spell of some kind would be an interesting twist on some of these cartoony tropes from the 80s. A mystic warrior whose only talent is to attract monsters. The first instinct is to have this sort of hero who tries to help, but wherever he goes, it always seems like monsters follow him. And so nobody wants him around because it always makes the situation worse. But then developing the story to the point where the hero, who's frustrated by this aspect of his drawing monsters, learn to use it as an advantage, where he can draw monsters in the middle of a battle that would slash through an enemy force to get to him, or one monster guarding a site would be drawn away or defeated by another monster that comes along, and the two monsters wipe each other out, and then you've solved that problem. You could also take it to a point where you get a character who might even be able to learn how to harness monsters in a way that's similar to a monster wrangler or even like a Pokemon kind of character, but with bigger, more horrible fantasy monsters. What if the whole thing was a planetary amusement park in a science fiction setting? I like to do this where I take like a fantasy setting and turn it into a science fiction setting sometimes. But in this case, what it would be is somebody set up a park where people could go play D&D LARPing, essentially, with machines and androids and holograms and that type of stuff. And their magic weapons are just technological weapons camped up to look like fantasy weapons. But somebody hacks the park and this strange fantasy setting is expanding out its empire and conquering new systems. And so the person whose park it is, the version of Walt Disney that started this park, has to hire professional mercenaries to come in and, acting as fantasy rangers and clerics and magic users, use specially designed equipment designed to work against the creatures in the park and looking like fantasy equipment to conquer and drive back the hacked park. But it's kind of a fun twist because you have these fantasy characters, opening up the circuit boards on their magical swords and stuff like that so that they can fix it or tune it up or upgrade it. And so it's kind of like a fun little twist on doing the fantasy setting with a science fiction turn. So those are the ideas that came from this. Hopefully some of them inspire you to do some story of your own or elements that you can pick from them and use in a story. Alright, I'll see you again tomorrow.